This is where they killed my baby at. This is the exact house. Look at the property, the grass, and how tall it is and everything. They shot him at this residence. They shot my baby at this house right here. This is where he was killed and murdered by these thugs, these people out here.
In the late hours of May 28, 2020, a mom would be tragically shot dead while looking for her son's killer. But this would only be the beginning of a chilling journey into darkness.
Good morning, everyone. This is Gregory Stewart's mother. My son was murdered in East St. Louis, Illinois, May the 29th of 2020. I'm desperately reaching out to the community for help in solving the murder of my son.
As the family fought for justice, they would soon uncover secrets, lies, and unexpected twists that would change everything. Determined to find the truth, his mother took up the quest to search for her son's killer, but nothing could have prepared her for the horrific turn her own life would take.
And tell the truth so that these murderers can be held accountable for what they did. They can be arrested, charged, and held accountable.
Just 3 years later at 6 p.m., as she was leaving work, she would be found lifeless, her body discovered in a quiet parking lot behind her vehicle at 419 North 9th Street in St. Louis. What had started as a mother's quest to find her son's killer had now turned into something far more sinister. The search for justice had cost her everything, and the truth of what had happened would be more sinister than anyone could have imagined. This is the life and death of Gregory Stewart. 34-year-old Gregory Stewart was born and raised in East St. Louis, Illinois. Gregory was the youngest of 4 siblings, and from an early age, he shared an unbreakable bond with his mother, Latasha Blackman Stewart. Often recalls the joy Gregory brought to their home with his huge smile, his warmth, and his endless energy. Gregory was more than just an aspiring artist. He was a loving father and a loyal son. His passion for music, particularly rap, had him on the verge of something greater. He was working on new tracks, networking with local producers, and his future in music looked brighter every day. To those who knew him, Gregory was the kind of person who drew others to him with his charm and infectious energy. His family was his world, and his friends were his extended family.
Together forever, you and I. Hey.
However, Gregory had a more precious role. It was that of being a father. He had 2 children, and despite his busy career ambitions, he made time to be present in their lives. His bond with his children was unbreakable, and the thought of them growing up without their father was a nightmare he couldn't have imagined coming true. Tragically, it did. Gregory Stewart was not just a son, he was a cherished part of his family, especially his mother, Latasha Blackman Stewart. This close-knit relationship transcended the typical mother-son dynamic, as Gregory's mother was his rock, his confidant, and his biggest supporter. Latasha recalls how her son always made time for her, no matter how busy life became, whether it was helping her with small tasks around the house or simply taking a moment to check in. Gregory's affection for his family was evident. His dream of becoming a famous rapper was something they had both nurtured together. He spent countless hours in the studio, often calling his mom to share his latest tracks and ideas. She had an unwavering belief in his talent and always encouraged him to pursue his dreams with the same passion he applied to everything else in his life. But the loss of Gregory would change everything for Latasha. On the night of May 28, 2020, Gregory stepped outside his home in East St. Louis, Illinois, to lend a hand to a friend. The night air was still, the neighborhood quiet, and Gregory, ever the compassionate soul, had no reason to believe this seemingly ordinary act of kindness would be his last. But no one could have predicted that this would be the last time his family would see him alive. At around 11:30 p.m., a gunman emerged from the shadows, their intentions dark and malicious. Without hesitation, they approached Gregory's home and opened fire. The sudden sound of gunshots shattered the calm night. It was the type of violence that no one could have prepared for, the kind of senseless act that can leave an entire community in shock. Gregory, who had always been the pillar of strength for his family, was now fighting for his life on the cold concrete of his own driveway. His friend, the very person who had called him outside that night, stood by helplessly, unable to do anything as Gregory collapsed. The sight was horrifying. The young father, once full of dreams and ambitions, was now on the ground, his life slipping away with every second. In those final moments, Gregory fought not just for his life, but for the future he would never get to live. Despite the fact that multiple people were nearby, no one came forward with meaningful information. The shooter vanished as quickly as they appeared, and Gregory's family was left with the agonizing silence of uncertainty. But little did anyone know this was the beginning of a tragic chain of events. Gregory's family, especially his mother Latasha, would be forced to endure not just the sorrow of his loss, but the painful weight of unanswered questions. The police investigation, which should have been the first step toward justice, seemed to stall. There were no solid leads, no suspects, and little progress. It felt as though Gregory's life, his legacy, was slipping through the cracks of an investigation that wasn't moving fast enough to give his family the closure they so desperately needed. Latasha, a mother whose love for her son had no bounds, was devastated beyond words. To lose him in such a violent, senseless manner was a pain that no mother should ever have to experience. But it didn't take long for Latasha's grief to transform into something more powerful. A burning desire for justice, she couldn't sit idly by while the investigation stalled, while the truth remained hidden behind a veil of silence. Latasha's motherly instinct kicked into overdrive. She wasn't just going to mourn Gregory's death, she was going to fight for answers. With no one else stepping up, Latasha decided to take matters into her own hands. Every day she would reach out to the community, speak to anyone who might have seen something, and tirelessly begged for anyone with information to come forward.
We know there were several people out here. They know what happened to my son. And tell the truth so that these murderers can be held accountable for what they did. They can be arrested, charged, and held accountable.
Her voice became the loudest cry for justice, and her mission was clear. She would stop at nothing to find out who killed her son and why. The same fierce love that had defined her relationship with Gregory now propelled her into action.
If we don't do it, who's going to do it? So we have to do it in order to be able to get justice for our son and closure for our family.
A mother determined to get the justice her son deserved. It was a role she never expected, but one she took on with every ounce of strength as she vowed to uncover the truth behind her son's tragic death and give him the justice he deserved. Despite the unspeakable pain of losing Gregory, Latasha was relentless in her pursuit of answers. She worked closely with Detective Props, the investigator handling the case, to find leads. Detective Props reassured her that the case wasn't forgotten, but as the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months, no new evidence came to light. Latasha was, however, not one to back down. She became a vocal advocate for justice, organizing marches, distributing flyers, and even opened a YouTube channel and a Facebook group and a Twitter page to share information about her son's death.
Good morning, everyone. This is Gregory Stewart's mother. My son was murdered in East St. Louis, Illinois, May the 29th of 2020. I'm desperately reaching out to the community for help in solving the murder of my son. Imagine if you all were in my shoes, how you would feel. Today it's me, but tomorrow it could possibly be you in the same shoes as I'm in today.
Placed signs and billboards in the city and has been a guest on podcasts to get the word out about her son's murder. Still, the response from law enforcement remained frustratingly slow. The detective would reassure her, telling her that they were working hard, but Latasha could feel the pressure mounting. Every day without answers was another day her son's killer remained free. But she wasn't alone in her fight. Meanwhile, May, Gregory's grandmother, also became involved in the effort for justice. She too began her own campaign for answers, reaching out to friends, community members, and even the media in an attempt to find anything that could lead to a break in the case.
If you're watching, or if you know of someone that should be watching this, I'm asking you as a mother to please come forward through the tip line. It can be done anonymously. This has completely devastated my family.
Her frustration grew not only with the lack of progress, but the fact that the police weren't responding to her inquiries. It became clear that, at least in their eyes, Gregory's case wasn't a priority. Latasha, however, refused to let the case go cold. She persisted, always believing that someone, somewhere, knew something.
Again, please come forward with the truth. Dig deep down in your heart. Do the right humanly thing in God's eyesight. And come forward with the truth and help us to solve Gregory's murder.
But a single detail emerged that shed new light on the investigation. Latasha's persistence began to pay off. Several street sources, people who had witnessed or heard something in the neighborhood, came forward with pieces of information. Although none of the leads provided solid evidence, they painted a more detailed picture of the events that night. Some claimed to have seen a car speeding away from the scene, though no one could identify the driver. Others mentioned seeing a figure lingering near Gregory's house earlier in the day. But again, no one could provide enough detail to make a concrete connection to the shooter. It was at this point that Latasha became even more determined. She shared these new pieces of information with Detective Props, hoping that it would lead to a breakthrough. She also reached out to the public again, sharing updates on social media and continuing her advocacy in local news outlets. Yet, the lack of tangible leads frustrated her to no end. But just when it seemed like things were about to turn a corner, tragedy struck again. On May 3rd, 2020, only days before the anniversary of Gregory's death, Latasha herself became a victim of violence. Leaving her shift at the Marriott Hotel in East St. Louis, she was shot and killed. The shooter targeted Latasha as she was leaving work, an execution-style murder that left her family reeling. It was a gut-wrenching blow. Latasha was not only Gregory's mother, but a tireless advocate for his case. In one tragic moment, she too became a victim, leaving her family further devastated and feeling even more isolated. Her death added an unexpected and tragic turn to the investigation, and just as with Gregory, there were no immediate leads.
His mother gunned down on her way home from work, steps from her car in a parking garage near the Dome at America Center. Tonight News 4 is pushing for answers in the death of hotel worker Latasha Stewart. Right now, detectives are working to find who pulled the trigger in the second homicide downtown in the span of a week.
And the Stewart family has already been victimized by violence. Latasha's son Gregory was murdered in 2020. That case remains unsolved. Since then, Latasha has devoted her life to finding his killer.
But then, a shocking twist would turn the investigation upside down. The arrest of a suspect in connection with Latasha's murder would send ripples through the investigation into Gregory's death. Deshaun, who was known to have a violent history, admitted to killing Latasha but denied any involvement in Gregory's shooting. Despite his claims, Latasha's family couldn't help but feel that there was a deeper connection between the two murders. The chilling possibility that Deshaun might be responsible for Gregory's death only added to the family's emotional turmoil. As the case began to unfold, May and Latasha's family grew convinced that Wilson had been involved in both tragedies. But could they prove it? Deshaun's arrest was just the beginning of a long, complicated legal battle. He'd been charged with Latasha's murder, and the investigation into Gregory's death was reignited. But the road to justice would be long. Even though Deshaun admitted to the killing, he still denied any involvement in Gregory's murder, leaving many unanswered questions. Latasha's family clung to the hope that they would finally get the answers they so desperately needed. But with no solid evidence linking Wilson to Gregory's death, the investigation continued to stall. As the investigation into Gregory's death continued, more details slowly started to emerge. Investigators focused on the new clues they had: the fact that Gregory's murder had left no physical trace and the absence of a clear motive. With little evidence and no new suspects, the case remained unsolved. However, Latasha's family, unable to accept the idea that justice for Gregory might never come, continued to search for answers on their own. Latasha's mother, May, was especially adamant that Deshaun was involved in her grandson's death. Though Deshaun had denied his involvement, May couldn't shake the feeling that he was lying. Something about his behavior, his refusal to speak in court, his odd connection to both murders, raised suspicions. May and the rest of the family began to ask questions that the police hadn't yet answered. Could Wilson have been behind Gregory's death? Or was there someone else out there pulling the strings? But as weeks passed, the frustration mounted. It was clear that the lack of cooperation from law enforcement and the legal system was hindering the progress. Despite this, Latasha's family didn't give up. They continued to speak out, raising awareness about Gregory's case on social media and at public events. Latasha's death had only fueled their fight. However, the more they pushed for justice, the more it seemed like the system was pushing back. May found herself repeatedly trying to contact Detective Prop for updates, but never getting any real answers. Even though Gregory's death had been ruled a homicide, the police were still operating in the dark, waiting for someone to speak up or offer evidence. But the silence from the community remained deafening. That was until a chilling new lead would force the case into the spotlight once more. It wasn't until a few months later that a new lead emerged. A neighbor who had initially stayed quiet came forward with crucial information that had been kept secret until then. This neighbor, who had witnessed the murder from their window, revealed that they had seen someone leave Gregory's home on the night of his death. They didn't see the face clearly, but they did note one very significant detail: an unfamiliar car parked near Gregory's house, which wasn't seen before the shooting occurred. While this new information wasn't a smoking gun, it sparked new interest in the case. The police had been operating on the assumption that Gregory's killer had fled the scene on foot, but now they had the possibility of a getaway vehicle. The question was, could this vehicle belong to someone connected to Deshaun King Wilson? Or was it someone else entirely? The lead was enough to get the police back into action, even reluctantly. Detective Props, still the lead investigator on the case, wasn't eager to accept that they had missed such a crucial detail, but it was a lead that could not be ignored. The only issue now was whether it would be enough to make an arrest, and whether the community would step forward to help identify the mystery person who was seen near Gregory's house that night. Despite all the setbacks, the growing pressure on law enforcement to solve Gregory's case started to show results. A tip came through to Crime Stoppers, anonymous, yet detailed enough to be taken seriously. The tipster claimed that Deshaun had been seen near the scene of Gregory's murder, and that he was often in the area where Gregory lived, hanging out with the same crowd. Investigators quickly realized that Deshaun had a criminal history, and his name kept surfacing in connection with violent acts in the neighborhood. Could Deshaun be lying about his being connected to the murder of Gregory Stewart? As of now, Latasha's family continued to fight for justice. May, still reeling from the loss of both her daughter and grandson, was determined to see it through. She had endured too much loss to allow the justice system to fail her family, but the fight for justice was not easy. The family faced increasing threats from unknown individuals who wanted to silence them, including death threats from anonymous sources. Latasha's activism in pushing for justice for Gregory had made them enemies, and those enemies weren't shy about letting the family know they had power in high places. Despite this, May and her family continued to speak out. They had become the voice for Gregory and Latasha, and they would not stop until the truth came to light. Their perseverance was inspiring, but their suffering was immeasurable. With the investigation still moving forward, the growing public interest was reaching a fever pitch. Latasha's death had already sparked a wave of activism, but as the details surrounding Gregory's case began to take shape, the family and community were left with a bittersweet hope. The arrest of Deshaun King Wilson had caused a ripple effect, reigniting the flames of justice in a case that had seemed all but forgotten. May, Latasha's mother, continued to raise her voice, determined to see justice served for both Gregory and Latasha. Despite the personal toll it was taking, May found strength in her family and community, refusing to let her pain silence the truth. However, the more May and her family pursued answers, the more they faced opposition. While some members of the community supported their efforts, Others, particularly those connected with the world Gregory was a part of, sought to undermine them. Letitia's family, however, refused to be intimidated. May, deeply committed to finding out the truth, used these threats as fuel for her mission. She knew that she had to keep her family's story alive in the public eye. May began to rally support from local groups, even reaching out to larger organizations and celebrities who could bring attention to the case. May Stewart's fight for justice has never been easy, but it has been relentless. From the tragic loss of her grandson Gregory to the heartbreaking death of her daughter Letitia, the Stewart family has endured unimaginable pain. Yet through it all, they've held on to hope, refusing to let their loved ones' deaths become forgotten. The community support has been invaluable, and the outpouring of love from all corners of the nation has given May the strength to continue. Every new piece of evidence, every breakthrough in the case brings her one step closer to the truth. But the fight is far from over. Letitia's death, Gregory's murder, these are not just stories. They are the lives of two people who matter deeply to their family, their friends, and their community. This is not just about finding a killer. It's about giving two families the closure they deserve and holding those responsible accountable for the harm they have caused. May Stewart continues to stand strong, urging anyone with information to come forward. Every tip, every small piece of information brings her family closer to justice. Justice for Gregory, justice for Latasha. This is not just the family's battle. It's a fight for truth, for accountability, and for the memories of those who were stolen far too soon. What do you think about this case? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and if you found this story intriguing, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.